right, welcome back to the IMNerd podcast, guys. I'm your host, Freeway, and I'm here with my co-host, Kenny.
No, you're not.
And today we have an exciting episode to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Edison Format Part 2 because RBET02 just passed. So RBET is a tournament series hosted by my boy Keegan over at E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! So follow that YouTube channel if you haven't already, but he posts a lot of content related to Edison Format, which is probably the most popular non-current Yu-Gi-Oh! Format at the moment. It's really fun. I've been playing it a lot, as you guys know. I've been promoting it a lot. I recently actually did commentary with Kenny on the tournament. And if you don't know what RBET stands for, I think it stands for Really Big Edison Tournament, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it stands
and
for
it's
really
also onomatopoeia for ribbit.
Yes, it actually means ribbit if you say it, RBET, and then it stands for Really Big Edison Tournament. So this event was really amazing. I actually opted to not go to the, quote, Philly Regional, even though it wasn't hosted in Philly. It was close to Philly. It was in PA, in Oaks, PA. And I chose to not go to that, which is wild because I haven't been to a regional in person in 2 years. But I chose to, instead of going to that, I decided to stay in for Edison and, you know, try to play in a tournament and then eventually the commentary all Saturday and all Sunday. And that's how I spent my weekend. And I had a great time. I think you also, Kenny, you definitely enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, I mean, day one, which was on Saturday, we did commentary for like, I want to say at least 6 hours, maybe 7.
Yeah, 6 or 7 hours. It definitely was a long time, a full-time job at that point. But when you're having fun, it never feels like a job. I'm very passionate about Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially now that I'm back playing in a way. So for me, it didn't even feel like we were doing it that long. When it got to like 9 p.m., I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, we've been doing this since, I don't know, like 2, 3.
Yeah, it was a grip. And then day 2, we did 5 hours, which was all of top 8,
Yeah.
which was really fun.
Yeah, so I want to speak on the status of Edison and some of the things that I've learned. I've learned a lot this weekend. So one of the things that I learned is that in order to do well, I think in these online Edison tournaments, you need to be not only making meta calls, but you also kind of need to be bold in your decision making and you need to be innovative. So I'll break down what I mean by those and we can kind of discuss them all. But the decks that did well were decks that did not top the last RBET tournament. I think that's really cool. So last time the tournament was dominated by things like Diva Hero. You had some unique stuff like the Amaryllis Plant Burn deck. You had Hero Beat. You had Vayu Turbo, which won the tournament. You had the Fairy deck, which has apparently been doing pretty consistent. And, you know, like there was a zombie deck that I believe got 7th at the last one. So this time around, zombies took the tournament, but then there was an emergence of new decks like this new, I call it FHM or FMH Frog Hero Monarch deck that I think I don't know how to say his name properly, but it's like
Ragnark or
Rognak, something like that. Yeah. Apparently he's one.
I don't know. I'm getting your name wrong. I'm sorry.
We don't know how to say your name, man. But
I got his name wrong all weekend.
Look, you can add me on Discord and you can tell us how to say it, and I will say it correctly going forward. But I don't know how to pronounce this name. But
that's not true. Fraser lied to all of you.
What do you mean?
Because Fraser was on Discord. And Keegan did tell us how to say it, and we still say it wrong.
Well, look, it is what it is. He's one of the innovators of this amazing deck. So I've always shit-talked on Frog Monarchs. I think Frog Monarchs are a terrible deck if you play the conventional just Frogs and just Monarchs, and that's it. Both Kenny and I, neither one of us like the deck because it's very linear. It does one thing every turn, and if that thing gets stopped, it loses, and if it doesn't draw Monarchs, it loses. Because of those reasons, we quickly realized the deck was not good, despite, you know, what people might try to tell you. There's a reason why that deck didn't even do very well in the actual Edison Shonen Championship 12 years ago, like Frog Monarchs. It wasn't a good deck then.
It's not good.
It's not a good deck. But these guys have found a way. Cameron Saunders, I could say his name easily, and Rognak, they found a way to make the deck do more. Like it kind of has extenders in a way. It has a bunch of plays. You set up dupe blocks and you could do things like bounce Stratos, bounce Monarchs to your hand. You have Miracle Fusion for extenders, and you also play a ton of discard traps like Wing Blast and Regeki Break. And those cards are obnoxious, particularly Wing Blast. I think we actually watched a game where we saw an opponent playing Hero Beat get his shit spun 4 times in a row.
Yeah, it was like Wing Blast, next turn Ryza, next turn Ryza, next turn Wing Blast. So it was like, you're not playing today.
Yeah, like he was stuck with the same 6 or 7 cards that he opened the game with and never saw another card until it was too late. So this deck can loop you and do all kinds. Substance Toad is one of those broken cards in the game. I think that goes without saying. That card is not once per turn. It has a secondary effect that people kind of forget about where frogs can't die in battle. It's a 1-star monster. It's water. You can bring it out with 1-for-1, which is always insane. That card has never been used for anything that is fair in the game's history. 1-for-1 has always been used for toxic shit. So Substitute is broken, and the deck plays 3 of it. Swap Frog is actually kind of broken too in his deck because I've seen plays where you go like Summon Stratos, search Malicious, 1-for-1, discard Malicious, summon Substitute out, banish Malicious, summon it, use Substitute's effect, bring out, Swap Frog, send a Treeborn Frog, do it again, send another Treeborn Frog, then bring out Dupe Frog, and then Swap Frog will have bounced Stratos to your hand in the middle of that whole tributing spree that you're doing. So you'll have Stratos back in your hand, you'll have Substitute, and you'll have Dupe Frog. So they're Dupe block technically. They can only attack Dupe Frog, and it can't die in battle. So you have like a little Dupe block going. If you wanna push that advantage even further, you can just turn the Substitute into a second Dupe Frog, and so you just end with double Dupe Frog, and Stratos is back in your hand after he's already searched. So you have that like plus going for yourself, and then they can't attack at all. And Treeborn Frog will come back on the next turn. So if you have any Monarchs, it only plays 6. It plays 3 Kai's, 3 Ryza, which are the most relevant ones. It really does a lot. It also thins the deck out turn 1 really quickly. Often, I think that's really strong too. It's kind of like understated how good that is to just, even if you just go Special Summon Swap Frog, Normal Summon Substitute, and you just tribute and get 90% of your frogs out of your deck, right? You only need 1 Swap Frog to kind of loop your Monarchs the rest of the game, to loop Stratos and stuff like that. And you can kind of dump the rest. Like, you don't need all the Substitutes after that. You don't need multiple copies of Swap Frog. You kind of dump them. And it also sets it up where you have water monsters for every Miracle Fusion you draw. You'll never have to worry about water, which is a problem that I think Kenny mentioned with Diva Hero, right? Like
that's a big problem with Diva Hero. I mean, you've talked about it more than I have, but once again, that's another deck that both of us don't really like.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
One of the problems with the deck is that sometimes you can only draw half the deck. You'll only draw the hero half, or you'll only draw the water half, and like you just kind of feel like you're not really going off. And Diva Hero can be explosive, but there's a lot of decks that are, the zombie deck, for example, that won is very explosive.
It's very explosive. I feel like and more consistent. In my opinion,
the zombie deck is always doing what it wants to do. Like it's got a plethora of searchers and recruiters. And I think the zombie deck kind of just works well. Whereas also the zombie deck doesn't have cards that you never, ever, ever want to see in your hand. Like Spine Gilman, maybe it's only 1 card, but it always feels bad. Like if you draw Spine Gilman, you're fucking angry. And it's going to happen. Like you can't just say, I'll never draw Spine Gilman. Like you will draw it.
Yeah, and that's actually a big thing that you brought up. Every single card in a lot of these decks is just good to have. I'm looking at the Frog Hero Monarch deck, for example, and there are no cards that you're like, if I draw this, I'm sick. Even the Unifrog has like it's actually a decent card, because once you establish a dupe block of any kind, either Substitute and Dupe Frog or just double Dupe Frog, Unifrog is a fucking problem.
Yeah, Unifrog, we watched Unifrog be a menace out there a couple times. And something else I like about the Frog Monarch hero deck is, we already mentioned that we don't really like traditional Frog Monarchs that much, but there's multiple reasons why. So, like for example, Light and Darkness Dragon is a really fun card, and when against certain decks, he can really cause problems. But there's so many cards that are common in this format that beat it, like Treeborn Frog just ruins Light and Darkness Dragon. Honest, you just summon Honest and then keep trying to bring them back to your hand, beats Light and Darkness Dragon.
All the Lightsworn monsters that mill on the end phase.
So there's
Vayu.
So there's a ton of popular cards and popular decks that just kind of beat Light and Darkness Dragon. And traditional Frog Monarchs, Lad was one of their big boss monsters, right? They get him out with Soul Exchange or whatever. The other thing that this deck does that I think is interesting is we all now live in the era where everybody plays 3 upstarts. And traditional Frog Monarchs also play Pot of Avarice. This deck could easily support Pot of Avarice.
Yes.
And obviously, Upstart Goblin is always good. But what I think is interesting is they don't play either of those cards. When you look at the deck, it doesn't really look like there's room for them, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So
the only thing that I could say, I don't want to fully agree that there's no room. So let's take Rog's deck, for example. I think that if you were to if I wanted to put 3 upstarts in this deck, I think
I would cut Raigeki Break.
So I think but I wouldn't cut all of them. So what I would do is I would cut down 1 Caius, 1 Ryza, and 1 Raigeki Break, or do 2 Raigeki Breaks and 1 Ryza, something like that, because you are going to be drawing your Monarchs more often. And from what I've noticed when I was watching this deck play, it doesn't need, like Frog Monarchs, to draw multiple Monarchs. It actually can just kind of play the game off of 1 or 2 of them, and run train on you with just those 1 or 2 monarchs, which is scary that it does it so well. And then if you deal with the monarch, then it starts dropping shit like Miracle Fusion on you, and it's like, oh my god, like,
Yeah.
what is happening? The sky's falling. Also, I've heard you say many times on stream, and this is getting off on a tangent a little bit, but Absolute Zero in this deck gets huge.
Yes, I said that multiple times because that's another thing with the Diva Hero deck. So, to make it clear, I think we already make it clear. Me and Fraser don't think Diva Hero is the best deck in the format.
Yeah, it's one of the most played,
people,
but definitely not the best.
Yeah, many people say it's the best deck. I really don't think it's the best. I don't think it's bad. I think the deck is very good.
Yeah, it's
but
good.
I don't
it's
think
fine.
it's the best deck in the format.
And this is not just because of this tournament either. I think if you listen to our other podcast episodes about Edison format, the one with Keegan and the one titled Edison format, and the one with Dale Bolito, the second one with Dale Bolito.
Yeah.
I think I brought up Diva Hero in all 3 of those episodes, and I've pretty much shat on it because it's just, I've played it a couple times now. And for me,
it's one of the most popular, but
it's very popular, which is, I still think that's strange because it's not very good. But what it does do is it's an OTK deck in disguise. And I don't know what people think of it when they're playing it, but to me, when I'm playing against Diva Hero or with Diva Hero, all you're really looking for is that one turn when you explode and kill your opponent. And when it does not do that, aka when it doesn't draw Miracle Fusion, when it doesn't get a water monster in the graveyard fast enough, or when it doesn't see the heroes, and when it doesn't see the water side, when it doesn't do that, it just does not grind well. So all the other decks have a really good late game. When I think about the quick draw decks, because they play Pot of Avarice, the cat decks, they play Pot of Avarice. A lot of other decks that just literally, like fairies, their late game is really strong because Dimensional Alchemist starts to become a real threat after a lot of things are banished. Then Christia start dropping, Free to Brave Wander becomes an issue. He's a +1 on summon, priority, and all that. Dark Arm starts dropping from the dark decks. Point is, the other decks grind well, and they kind of start the game off fine too. Maybe not as explosive as Diva Hero has the propensity or the potential to be, but they still start off pretty strong. Like fairies can get started as early as turn 1. If you put a monster in attack mode, they can crash into it 4 times and drop Christia. So like and Vayu can turn 1 Greffer, discard Sirocco or Vayu, and immediately hit you for 4,000, which has happened to me a couple times. Half my life turn 1, so the other decks that are not Diva Hero, they can grind well, but I feel like they just have a better late game, and Diva Hero's late game honestly just sucks. Like, it's just not a good late game. Yeah, it fizzles out and starts to become awkward.
And on the note of Zero being huge, like in that deck, when Zero comes out, usually he's 2,500. Sometimes you might have Treeborn on the field or something.
Or a Spine Gilman or something, but
but in this deck, in the Frog deck, there might be double Dupe Frog and a Treeborn. It's like you're fucking Absolute Zero.
We saw literally 4 frogs and Absolute Zero out.
Yeah, and he's gigantic.
We saw 4 frogs. We saw Substitute, Dupe, Swap with a Absolute Zero on the far left column, and I was like, why is he just randomly 4,500?
Yeah, so he can be real scary when he comes out. Like, you want to talk about a clock? Like, Absolute Zero is always scary because of his effect, but the fact that his stats become so damn big in this deck is really, really scary.
There was another play that I saw. I don't remember who did it out of Cam or Rog, but one of them went Activate Miracle Fusion. The opponent had 2 monsters. He went Activate Miracle Fusion, Summon Absolute Zero, then Normal Summon Substitute, Priority, Tribute Absolute Zero.
Yeah.
And to me, that shit was cracked because then he brought out like a Swap Frog with Substitute's effect, and then Absolute Zero wiped the guy's field down. And he was able to do to set up his dupe block, and then next turn Treeborn comes back, and then the frogs start to multiply. So every turn you don't deal with it, it starts to develop this line, because Treeborn Frog is just a continuous +1 that transforms into a different frog. And eventually you find yourself facing down 3 to 4 frogs, and everything that they summon at that point is getting bounced back to the hand, because you can't even attack the Swap Frog.
Nope.
Like, you can't even. So if they summon Stratos, for example, or a Caius or a Ryza, and they have all those frogs on the field, and Swap Frog is one of them, he can just bounce, you can just bounce your Monarch or your Stratos or whatever back to your hand, and you can't attack it. And another thing that this deck does well, I hate Elemental Hero Ocean, except in this deck. You can't attack him. Typically, when somebody summons Ocean against me, that shit never resolves. I've never let someone resolve an Ocean on me, really. It's to the point where I go out of my way to kill Ocean. I'll either kill it by battle or bottomless it, or if he attacks Deep Prison, Mirror Force, whatever, I'll do whatever I have to do to get that shit off the field, because I know what it means if somebody gets back Stratos. Against a Frog Hero Monarch deck, though, a lot of times when this deck sets up Ocean, you can't get to it.
You can't stop him, and that's so cool, because there's a lot of decks that will kind of force Ocean into it. Like the Diva Frog deck, I don't think all the lists play Ocean, but at least half of them play Ocean. Some of the Hero Beat decks play Ocean, and I just don't really know why. Like, I don't really think Ocean is that good in the Hero Beat deck.
I also don't like the Hero Beat decks that play Miracle Fusion. I'm not a fan. I think
So
I think Hero Beat should be more stun, but
one of the top 8 is Hero Beat, and it plays Miracle Fusion. And I agree. I don't think Absolute Zero is that good in the Hero Beat deck because you end up. We saw it multiple times, and we commented on the top 8. That said, congratulations to the guy for getting top 8. He did great, 200+ man tournament.
Right.
But what I found interesting is there was multiple times I watched him play, and like he wouldn't have any back row. And to me, the Hero Beat deck is all about the back row.
It's
Alias
terrifying when it sets 4. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Alias and 4 back row. And so there was times when people were like, "Oh, maybe he just drew all monsters." And in my head, I was like, "How? Don't they only play like 6?" But there's other lists that play so many more monsters, and it's kind of like
I want to look at the Hero Beat deck. So he actually plays 12 monsters plus 3 E-calls, 1 Rhoda, so that's up to 16. And if you count Miracle Fusion as kind of like a monster, that's 19. If you count Hero Blast, which is kind of like a monster too, that's 22. So it's playing a lot of monsters. And that leads to those hands that are kind of awkward where you do have an Alias out there on his lonesome and no back row. And we saw that. I mean, that's kind of how he ended up losing the tournament. I don't know how his other games went because they weren't streamed for the most part, but congrats on making top 8. But I do think that there are 2 different types of Hero Beat decks, and one of them plays Absolute Zero, and the others are more of a stun variant. And I think the stun variants do better, not only because they play less monsters and more back row and just more hateful, but the other thing that they do well is they get to play Oppression and Skill Drain. And I think that those are the most powerful traps in the format. Obviously, Dust Shoot, being like Omega Jame. But outside of Dust Shoot, Oppression and Skill Drain. You can main deck both Oppression and Skill Drain if you don't play Miracle Fusion or you don't play Ocean. And then you can streamline your deck where you're playing Stratos, 3 Alias. You could play Captain Gold if you want. The double Honest is mandatory. And you could either do, you could leave it there. You could play Crusader of Endymion, or you can play Beast King Barbaros. And Skill Drain of Beast King Barbaros, I don't need to say it, but like that is not okay. 3,000 attack. If you play Triple Book of Moon, not only does it prevent your opponent from making synchro plays, but Book of Moon also resets Beast King Barbaros and makes him a 3,000 attack monster when you flip him. So there's builds for Hero Beat. Like I have my own builds and stuff that are really streamlined, and they're more of it's more stun like than it is this variant that wants to special summon like everyone else, because I feel like it loses some of its luster when it's going for Absolute Zero. You know what it is? I think the other decks that summon Absolute Zero just do it better.
They do it better, yeah. I also think if you look at this deck, right, it plays Dark Bribe, right? When you play Dark Bribe, you're playing Dark Bribe because you have back row to protect.
Yes.
If you're not setting 4 back row, Dark Bribe shouldn't be in your deck, right?
Yeah, it's kind of awkward.
So there's that. And so if you take Future Fusion and 3 Miracle Fusions out of your deck, that's 4 slots for opening up Book of Moon, Dark Bribe, Upstart Goblin. And then if you take the 2 Oceans out of your deck, there's a lot of room to put other cards into this deck.
Yeah, this deck has a lot of room. And like I said, I even have builds that are more stun-like. They don't play any of the Miracle Fusion or Water Monsters. I think Water Monsters in general suck outside of the frogs. Like I typically don't like the Water Monsters in the game. Diva's fine, but I hate having to play Spine Gilman. I don't think anyone likes having to play it. I understand that you can go into Catastor.
That's why I like the zombie deck just plays 2 Diva and says, it says fuck Spine Gilman. Like,
yeah, I'm a big fan of that too. I'm a big fan of the fuck Spine Gilman. You could even play 3 Diva in the zombie deck if you wanted to. I know that people actually did that back in the day. They just played 3 of it because you want to draw it. You do want to see it, but then it also plays Plague Spreader Zombie, so it can get away with it. I love that the zombie deck is to play Mind Control in the main deck, because so much of the format is people setting monsters, and a lot of times it's Hamster or Ryko, and sometimes it's Spy. No matter what it is, as long as it's not Sangan, if you have a tuner in your hand, you can always do something with it. So when you Mind Control it face down,
it plays enough tuners to really support Mind Control.
Yeah.
And it can go. Mind Control is really nice in the main deck of that deck. That's the thing that's cool about it, is that it gets the main deck cards that just, like, Book of Life is a DD Crow, in quotes. Like, it gets the main deck cards that are just hateful, but it doesn't sacrifice any of its own shit. It main decks Return from a Different Dimension, and it's just like, that card is just fucked up on its
Yeah,
own.
it's just game
You're
a lot of
dealing,
times when you resolve that card, especially if you're resolving return on your own turn, you probably are killing your opponent.
yeah, so you have like Plague Spreader and Mizuki, so it's one of the only decks that can naturally support bringing Plague Spreader back after he uses his effect, number one.
Right.
But number two, everybody plays Deep Prison Bottomless,
Yeah, that's
so
the other
like,
thing. You get a lot of your shit gets banished because other people are just Kaiusing you.
yeah,
They're like bottomlessing you, they're deprisoning you. So you naturally end up with banished cards. So return just makes sense. Like it's just one of those cards that makes sense. It's really cool. I really like this deck list. I also like, so it plays 2 Book of Life, and like you said, it's a pseudo DD Crow, and it's kind of better in a lot of situations because it puts a monster on board. The zombie package is so good. And I
it
learned because
really
I
is.
like the fairy deck, and the fairy deck plays recruiters, which is something that's kind of lost in the format. Like no one plays really giant rats or mystic tomatoes, but Shining Angel, Nova Summoner played in a fairy deck, and I've been playing the fairy deck a lot lately, and I really think the deck is extremely good, but it doesn't. It goes into DD War Lady, and you know sometimes in niche situations you can go into other stuff, but those cards don't float the same way that Goblin Zombie floats. Like Goblin Zombie
Yeah,
is for all intents and purposes a Sangan.
Turtle into Zombie is sick. And then you can even go Turtle into your deck, like Turtle into Zombie, Turtle into Spirit Reaper, Turtle into Zombie Master, Turtle into Plague,
Yep,
into
there's
you can go into
so
Mizuki,
many, right?
like all of your cards you can get from Turtle, and they're all cards you want. Like,
Yes, and it's hard to kill zombies. It's hard to like. It's funny to say that hard to kill zombies, but it is actually hard to kill this deck because one Pyramid Turtle can stall you out completely. Not only because Pyramid Turtle just searches under a monster, because it also just can get Spirit Reaper and end your turn. Like a lot of times
yep,
that'll just be the end of your actual turn. And then sometimes it puts you in a situation where you don't even want to attack. Like if you attack a face down on this turtle and they get another turtle, I don't even know if I want to continue attacking at that point because I don't want them to end on Goblin Zombie. Because then
yeah,
they end
yeah,
on Goblin Zombie, then they can just go draw Sack for Caius or draw Summon Diva, draw Summon
yep.
Plague Spreader Zombie, right? Like all of
And
those situations.
that's what's scary too. Like if they go fucking if they have Zombie on the field, the fact that they play 3 tuners, that
Yeah,
between Plague and 2 Divas,
and
that means they
Caius's,
have
yeah,
a 40% chance of having a tuner in their
yep,
opening hand.
yep.
And then yeah, they've got the Caius, and so it gets bad. It gets bad.
Yeah, the deck plays a lot of good cards. Burial's really good. Burial has strange interactions too that you can do. So if you're playing against the fairy deck and they have exactly 4 fairies, you could chain Burial before they get to their main phase 2. Because a lot of times they get to 4 by crashing Shining Angels and Nova Summoners. But let's just say they randomly had something, a fairy banish, you could chain Burial, put some of your stuff back, and then put their 1 fairy back, and it'll make them have 5 fairies now. And that could ruin their entire setup. And I only say that because I've actually done that before.
Yeah, yeah.
Like somebody crashed into me a couple times with the fairy deck, and then I was like, okay, I'll Burial and push it back, and it messed them up. So that is really cool to me. That's a thing. What else does it? I mean, I think Book of Life is really well placed in the format. It's a great meta call to play that card. The other thing is, I watched a game. I think you were obviously commentating it too, but he banished like double Vayu from somebody playing the Vayu Turbo deck with
Yeah,
Black Wings. He just like there were 2 Vayus banished, but they were banished by themselves. There was no Siroko's or anything with them.
yeah.
And I looked at it, it's like, oh, he Book of Life those. Like those got Book of Life.
Dude, Book of Life is so, and what's so fucked up about it is the amount of things it hates. Like it hits Lightsworns from having 4 names. It hits the fairies from having 4 fairies. It hits the Vayu deck. It hits frogs.
It's
Like Book of Life,
malicious. Yeah.
it hits malicious. It hits every deck. But then on top of that, this format doesn't have Monster Reborn. So like it also is Monster
Yeah.
Reborn. It's also Premature Burial. Like
Yeah.
Monster Reborn's not in this format, and the fact that it not only hates their graveyard, it goes, oh, and I get Goblin Zombie back. Oh, and I get Plague Spreader back. Like
Yeah.
that's
It
fucked
it does
up.
do something unique in the format that no other deck really has. Like you said, a Monster Born, it's an extender. So you try to go for a play and they stop and you're like, okay, Book of Life and try again. And it can get multiple uses out of Plague before it uses Plague's real effect to banish himself,
Yes,
which I
and
like.
that's what's really good too, because everybody loves Plague Spreader, right? And the fact that he from the graveyard, but you do put yourself a turn behind to use him, etc., and then he gets banished. The fact that Zombies is really the only deck that can use Plague multiple times through Zombie Master, through Book of Life, through Mizuki. Like you have all these ways of using Plague
Yeah.
Spreader multiple times before you have to be forced into using his effect.
Yeah.
And then even after you use his effect, you fucking return from a different dimension, and you're like, I fucking bring him back.
Yeah, or burial, and then just use, start doing stuff again. The deck is really cool. I think it was the perfect time to play this type of deck. The format is getting more and more graveyard dependent. It has a good matchup against the Frog Hero Monarch deck that just came out. It has a good matchup against. I will say the Dragon decks, those, but also like Sky Scourge and Alias. Even though only one person apparently played it in RBET02, the deck wasn't really well represented. But I do think that if you get a turn, it can hurt that deck too. Like Book of Life can just do a lot of things, and it's just well placed. I like some of the side deck stuff that I saw this tournament. A lot of Soul Releases.
Yes.
Soul Release really showed its ass this weekend. Even if you don't see it as much in the top 8 deck list side decks per se, the winner played it, and I definitely contributed to him doing well because we watched games. I think he played Tom on around at one point, and he just kept Soul Releasing and banishing everything.
Between Book of Life, Soul Release, DD Crow, like,
and he plays Kaiko too in the side deck.
And you play Kaiko in side deck, like, you are making it so that they can't play the game. Because I don't think there's a deck in the format that is going to beat you off just their main deck. Like, every single deck needs their graveyard.
Yeah, all the good decks, even Hero Beat, because Hero Blast is a necessary card when they play. You know what I mean? So every deck does need its graveyard to some degree, some more than others. And so yeah, the Soul Release is actually kind of slept on. If I were to make a top 10 most slept on cards in Edison format, I think Soul Release is either 1 or 2.
Yeah, it's
very slept on.
Really strong card.
We saw other things performing well in the side deck, like Vanity's Fiend. That card caused a lot of problems.
Obviously, Fossil Dyna. I like Fossil Dyna a lot.
Fossil Dyna was out. We saw a Glabbies Hunter and a Frog Hero Monarch side deck. And that actually it was relevant when it got flipped because I think a Glabbies attacked into it and then he couldn't tag out. He also couldn't contact. But then I think that, so my thoughts on Glabbies Hunter are as follows. The problem with the card is that once it's known that you side that, the opponent has no incentive to ever attack your face down monster again. I'm never attacking your face down monster, especially if you're playing frogs, because what am I even trying to kill face down? If it's a Treeborn Frog, your hand's bad. And if it's anything else, it's probably Dupe Frog, right? So I'm just going to bounce. No Glabbies really beats Dupe Frog, so I'm just going to bounce off of it. And then at that point, I also can't attack anything else besides Dupe Frog, so it just creates an awkward situation. I mean, you can tag out off of Dupe Frog, but there's no reason games 2 and 3 that you should be attacking face down monsters with Glabbies against frogs when you really think about it. So once you attack into a GB Hunter, which is what happened on stream, when you see that they side it, if you get to game 3, you never attack a face down again. And then Glabbies play stuff like Triple Book of Moon. Sometimes they play Grand Mole. Sometimes they play Smash and Ground, or just removal in general, right? And those cards really hurt that card, like the GB Hunter. You could just Book of Moon and then contact. Like if the guy had Book of Moon right there, he goes attack with Bestiary. Oh, it's GB Hunter. Okay, I'll Book of Moon it, then I'll contact and then pop it and pop the rest of your cards, and you start to lose from there. It has a surprise factor. And that's what it kind of did to, I think his name was Xavier Saldivar. He caught him with it, and it kind of stunned him for one turn where it was like, oh shit, I can't tag out, I can't, contact or whatever. But then the next turn, I think he just immediately drew Smashing Ground. But I don't think him drawing Smashing Ground is even why I don't think GB Hunter is good. I think that the novelty wears off because the stats of that card are weird. It has 1200 attack, so you can't summon it. And then it has 2000 defense, so you want it to be attack face down and stay in defense mode. So it's such an awkward card to me. Whereas, like Kenny said, something like Fossil Dyna just does what it does when you set it and they attack it. It just kills their monster flat out. So even if they establish a Heraclinos or 2 Laquaris or whatever, if they don't have Chariot, Fossil Dyna just wipes the board.
Yeah, they got to deal with it right now. And then on top, then it has a Vanity's Fiend effect. What I do like, though, is from the Frog Hero players, is that they do know that Glabbeast are a problem. Like, they reckon, because, like, Glabbeast really is frog.
The bane of frogs.
Like, it's so hard to beat Glabbeast with frogs. So, it is good to see, like, the recognition that, like, even in this tournament, I think only one person really played Glabbeast, or at least one that I saw. It's like, you need side deck space to deal with Glabbeast. Whether or not the answer is GB Hunter or something else, we'll see.
Yeah, Glabbeast, I talk about this all the time, but the standard Frog Monarch deck, not the hero one that these guys made, but standard Frog Monarchs cannot be Glabbeast. They probably can't even win a game. It's really difficult. Chariot is too much. The fact that they kind of leave their field open, or they put out monsters with terrible stats that you can just bounce off of and get free tag outs, that you can get Secutor so quickly and easily. These things make the Frog deck suffer against Glabbies a lot. And this, again, this version of the deck just kind of thwarts that by not only dupe blocking, but also just having big monsters. They've kind of puts big monsters out. Like putting out an Absolute Zero and then knowing that I have a Caius too that I've been kind of bouncing to my hand, it's just too many problems. And you can only do so much.
Yeah. The other thing, when I look at the deck list that I like about it, is I do think it fixes some of the problems with normal Frog Monarchs, where it was cards that people just played because there was nothing else to play, I feel like Battle Fader.
Yes.
Like, Battle Fader was just there to, like,
that card.
It's there to just stall or whatever, but, like, it's not, like, fuck that card. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I do not like Battle Fader.
Instead of 3 Battle Fader, it's like, we got Stratos, Ecall, and Rhoda. Like, it's just so much better.
Yeah, I don't like Battle Fader. I see that one of them was citing Mirror of Oaths. I think it's only one of them citing it. Yeah, Mirror of Oaths is in triplicate. So Cam was like, I'm not citing GB Hunter. I think the card, he probably said, I think the card's terrible. And he was correct. He opted for Mirror of Oaths, which, when your opponent special summons a monster from the deck, it's a trap card. It destroys the monster or monsters. So if it's Rescue Cat, it can actually pop both the things they get, and then you draw a card. So it replaces itself and also kills their monster. So this can be very good. I tested Mirror of Oaths back in the day, literally in Edison format, and the card is just okay. But I think that just okay is fine for the Frog Hero Monarch deck, because if they don't get their monsters to stick, then they just end up with back row with, like, you can end up with a Chariot, right, with no Glabbies.
Yeah.
And that's all the Frog Monarch decks want anyway. They want you to not have a Glabbie so that they don't have to even think about Chariot when they're going to go Tribute for Monarch. Because if I go Tribute for Ryza and you just have back row and I target one of them, I don't give a fuck what happens now.
Yeah. I mean, Mirror of Oaths is pretty good there, because at the end of the day, it's not a card you would main deck. You're only bringing that card in for the one matchup.
Yep.
And if it helps you win that one matchup, so they can't get a monster to stay on the field, then it did its job, and that's all it needs to do.
They clearly know Glabbies is the matchup that they don't want.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell, like, anytime you see, if you see GB Hunter in someone's side deck, you know that they realize very quickly, I do not want to play against Glabbies. They also both side bottomless, which I have to assume is also probably for Glabbies. Obviously, it can cover more matchups like Vayu Turbo and stuff, but I have to imagine that's also for Glabbies and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think this deck coming out of this tournament is really cool. Apparently, it used to be a 60 card deck or upwards of 50 something, and it's been refined. Yeah, it's been refined over time to get down to 40, which is amazing.
Dude, big respect to them. I'm happy that they came up with this innovation on the deck, because everybody knows I love Monarchs. I wasn't a big fan of the Frog Monarch variation in its vanilla form. I didn't like it that much back in the day because I thought it had the same problem it still has today. But this iteration of it, I'm actually excited to try to play, because I really like Monarchs. Frogs are all the frogs are cool monsters. I like their art and shit.
Yeah.
And the explosiveness of Stratos, Miracle Fusion in this deck is really good. Also, I do like the Alias in there too. Like, Alias just being a big boy, just hitting shit.
Yeah, he came up a lot. He actually came up a lot.
He did come up a lot.
Alias is cool, and one of them, Rog cited a second Alias, which also so good against decks like Hero Beat, where just 1900 attack and Glabbies, 1900 attack goes far in those weird matchups like that.
Yeah.
Whereas beatdown or stun, 1900 just goes so far.
That's another thing that helps with the Glabbeast matchup. I still think Glabbeast have the advantage over this deck just because of the natural flow of the deck. But between Alias and Stratos being bigger monsters that you can just normal summon, to help the tempo versus Glabbeast, I do think is really nice.
And it goes without saying, if we haven't actually said it, I realized just now, but one of the other things that make Glabbeast such a nightmare for the Frog decks in general is they main deck Rediari, which is accessible by Test Tiger or just a battle phase. You can get Rediari, and that is just problematic for obvious reasons. So just to kind of also reiterate why it's annoying to play against, it's not just the Chariot, it's also the fact they have a main deck constant DD Crow on demand.
Yeah, just Rediari, your Treeborn, and now you're really frustrated because Treeborn's your biggest source of +1 in the deck.
Yes, against every other matchup, that card is going to be annoying because it walls them out, so it's hard to get to your life points. It's used for substitute every turn, so every time the game goes on, like we saw so many times they would end up with 4 or even 5 frogs going across their board.
Yep.
And every
Yep.
time that happened, that was just game. We did not see them lose any game where they got to constantly multiply frogs across the board.
Yeah, if they get double dupe, fucking swap and absolute zero, it's like you're not beating this board.
Yeah, it just gets out of hand. Another innovative deck that came out of this tournament, though, and one of the ones that really
Oh yeah,
impressed
yeah.
me.
We didn't talk about this one yet. I like this one.
So Marcus 19. So it's cool because multiple, I guess, teams or groups of people topped with the same exact deck. So Time on a Round and the guy Marcus both topped with a Lightsworn deck that transforms into Vayu Turbo.
Yep.
And I think that one of the coolest things about old Yu-Gi-Oh! Is transformation side decks. They're a forgotten thing, they're a relic of the past. And current Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't think any deck in recent years, in the last 5 years, I'll say, has transformed when it side decks. It doesn't become a completely different deck. But that is such a cool lost art. And in bigger tournaments, it really, really pays off. Because what's happening here is game one, you play against Lightsworn, win or lose, you are going to side anti-Lightsworn cards. And a lot of times, those anti-Lightsworn cards are going to be Light Imprisoning Mirror. But what happens when your opponent literally takes out 99% of their light monsters and switches them for all dark monsters and a deck, because Vayu Turbo is a damage dealing deck. It's a beatdown deck. It's very fast.
So fucked up.
So you switching to light mirrors, we actually saw this on stream. We got to see so much. But we watched a guy on stream, I think his name was Burndig. He played against Tom on Around. And the last game that he played, he went set 4 back row. And Tom went around switching to Vayu Turbo, so he went like Summon Card Trooper Mill 3. And then he like Summon Armageddonite next turn. He's cracking him. And we're like, what are those 4 back row? Right? Like what are those? Because at the time we didn't even understand that he had sided into Vayu Turbo. We didn't know what was going on, but he never saw a light monster. So he just ended the game losing with Light Imprisoning Mirror set because there was never an opportunity to use it.
Because all the wolves are gone. The Honest is most likely gone. I'm assuming you take JD out. Like, you take all that shit out, and now you got Vayu, fucking Sirocco, Dad, Greffer.
Yes.
And you're like, and all of a sudden, you were fighting this light deck, this, really fast, aggressive light deck, and then all of a sudden, you're fighting against Vayu Turbo, and you're like, what the fuck happened? And what's so cool about decks like this is game one, you play against Lightsworn, right? You're like, all right, well, I'm siding against Lightsworn. Game two, you're fighting Vayu Turbo. So now, what do you do game three?
Yes, if you do happen to get to game three, you're very confused on which route they're going to go. Because they don't have to go back to Lightsworn. They don't have to stay in Vayu. They can do whatever they want.
And that's fucked up. Like, they can be like, all right, we're going back to Lightsworn. All right, we're staying Vayu Turbo. And so you're literally, if you get to game three, what do? You're like, I don't know what to side for. Like, he's playing 2 decks.
Yes.
He's cheating. He's fucking cheating.
They could even do a mix of both. You don't know how it's going to go. So this is pretty innovative for the reborn Edison format. I'll call it New Edison. I don't know, you have New Jersey because Edison is in Jersey. So let's say this format, New Edison, this is really cool because this is something that was actually done back in the day, but I feel like everyone forgot about it. And it's been brought back into the limelight. And I love to see it. I think that Lightsworn is a pretty strong deck for game one because it can, going first, it's very, very strong, right? Like naturally it sets up a board. It can mill wolves before your opponent gets to do anything. It can set its Raikou first. And it has the scariest mills out of all the decks that play Raikou. A lot of decks that play Raikou are like Quick Draw and Cat decks and Flamvel and stuff like that. And their Raikous are just whatever. They're just kind of fuel for pot avarice. But when you attack a Raikou, or when a Raikou gets flipped in a Lightsworn deck, it could just spell disaster. It can literally mill Wolf, Garna, and another monster. And then the next thing you know, the game is basically over because they just went +1 on the Wolf, and the Garna is just going to be problematic when you really need to attack over, let's say, a Card Trooper, and you can't.
Yep.
So
it also doesn't really sacrifice its boss monster because in main deck's Chaos Sorcerer, and like it's going to lose JD, but it gets Dad. So it's like
it actually does, and it's not trying to play a long game once it switches into Vayu Turbo. That deck is just so fast. Like I said, Greffer and a Blackwing Armwing is literally 4,000 damage. So just as half your life.
The other thing that's smart is like in order to make the deck work, because obviously you need like the side deck space, etc. Instead of main decking 2 Celestia, they just go 1 Celestia, 1 Caius.
Yes.
Caius is really good anyway. Celestia is basically a Monarch anyway.
Yeah.
So the thought process of being like, I don't need to play 2 Celestia. I can just have a Caius. That way it's easier to go in the Vayu Turbo. I think is
Yeah,
really smart.
it's well thought out because I assume that when they do side deck, they use all 15. So there's Armageddon Knight, 3 Sirocco, 3 Vayu, 1 Crow, 1 Dad, 2 Greffer, 1 Burial, 2 Oppression, 1 Torrential. And I assume all 15 go in. And then I
Yep.
also assume they take out things like Aaron, Garoth, Jane, both the JD, Lumina, all the Wolves, right? And then the Honest probably don't make sense either. And Solar Recharge, some of them, I know that they keep in the Rykos because Rykos played in Vayu Turbo and is played in
Yep.
Lightsworn. So in
Yep.
the Hamster stays. So they side out all of those light monsters that are supporting JD and JD himself for all the Vayu cards. And it puts in Oppression, which is so good because, as you know, Oppression doesn't affect Vayu at all. It can just keep activating like Tree Bark Frog over and over again. So that interaction is really good because Oppression is one of the most powerful cards in the game. And depending on what your opponent's playing, it can really be detrimental for them if you
That's the other thing that's fucked up, right? Is like you said, light imprisoning mirror, but also a lot of side decks do have oppression on the side deck, right? So I'm okay. I'm playing against Lightsworn. All right, I might bring in oppression, but then
Yes. Not only
then
that, it's kind of funny
like
because
I'm not playing Lightsworn anymore.
a lot of people side out their back row destruction against Lightsworn.
Yeah,
Like when I play against Lightsworn, I'll be honest, if I play against Lightsworn, I don't keep in things like Heavy Storm.
yeah, because you don't need it.
Like it just doesn't make sense for the even if you're playing against a Lightsworn player who mirror forced you or something, you probably realize if you got to see enough of the game, like if you see enough mills, they don't play mini traps. So
Yeah,
it's kind of not worth playing. Like I might keep an MST, but Heavy Storm has to go. It's just not worth keeping a Heavy Storm against Lightsworn. You don't want to dead draw it. There's a chance they don't see any traps. Even the decks that topped only played 3 traps. So there's a high chance that they
Yep.
never see a back row.
Dust Shoot, Mirror Force, Solemn Judgment.
And Dust Shoot's probably getting used immediately.
And it's all traps, right? Now, if you look at this, it's like you're not heavy storming them. Like if you heavy storm their Solemn Judgment, okay,
They're
whatever.
just like, sure, that's fine.
Dust Shoot happens immediately. You don't get a chance to play Heavy Storm. And then, yeah, you might Heavy Storm their Mirror Force. So, okay, your Heavy Storm has one target.
Yeah, it has one real target. Like Book of Moon, a lot of people just hold that in their hand until they need it anyway. You may catch the Book of Moon. You most likely will not. And MST, most people don't set MST unless they're playing against something that runs Future Fusion. There's no incentive to really set MST outside of Future Fusion, I think. So yeah, Heavy Storm doesn't have much merit. So we're saying all this to say you side out those back row removal cards like Dust. A lot of people made like Dust Tornado. You saw all of that shit out, then they put in Oppressions, and it's like, God damn it. Like not only did you switch your whole deck, but you also like ruined me because I sided out a lot of the cards that deal with this. So we got to see on stream a masterclass of what happens when people side an anti-Lightsworn cards and the deck becomes Vayu Turbo. It's really funny. And I'm gonna be honest, Burn did kind of rage quit. The guy asked him at the end of the game, what were your back row? And he said nothing and left the door. You remember that, Kenny? That was on stream.
I do remember that.
Yeah, that was on stream.
That was clean.
One of the decks that I did not expect to top, but it is actually innovative in itself, was a Blackwing deck. Like a straight up Blackwing deck, playing Black Whirlwind and everything. What he did do though, and a lot of the good players have complained about how awful Bora is. Bora the Spear, 1700 Blackwing monster. The card's just not good. And back in the day, every Blackwing player just played it. No one questioned it. No one realized how awful it was in 2010. You just kind of like, all right, this is just what I'm doing. You had that one cool play where you go summon Sirocco, special summon Bora, pump him up to 3700 and trample. And that was cute, right? Like that was cute. But at the end of the day, now with the 2022 lens, a piercing 1700 monster is just not it. It's just not it. So he opted to mix pure Blackwing with Vayu Turbo. And the results were actually kind of nice because you still get your broken openings where you just go Whirlwind Shura, and that searches either Gale or Blizzard for the follow-up. But then you also end up with the speed of Vayu Turbo because you play 2 Greffer and 3 Vayu and 3 Sirocco. So you can also just end up going turn 2 after a Black Whirlwind, normal summon Greffer, pitch Vayu, and it's just super awkward from that point forward because the tempo is so strong on Vayu Turbo, like the amount of aggression that comes at you from that deck. And it's still playing triple Icarus attack, and it's playing a roll oppression, it's playing upstart so that it can see its Black Whirlwind more often. We saw him game 2, even though he struggled game 2 opening up Whirlwind Shore, he should have won the game very easily if he just summoned Brionic and the game would have been over. You can watch that on the actual ETV video. Yeah, if he just summoned Brionic and pitched Vayu, the game would have ended 10 turns before it actually did. But no, everyone makes mistakes or whatever. But just if we're thinking about this from a perfect standpoint, he had a crazy setup opening up Whirlwind Shura, which is what everyone used to fear back in the day. Like I remember when I used to play against Black Wings, all I will hope is that God, please don't let this guy open up Whirlwind Shura, and every time they did, it's just like an uphill battle. So yeah,
But
I didn't expect to see this in Top Cut, but it kind of makes sense. Vayu Turbo won the last one. You don't want to just play the exact deck that won the last tournament. In fact, Vayu Turbo did not top technically, and
no, it didn't.
because I would consider this Vayu Turbo.
It topped in the way of Smokescreen, right? It topped in
Yes.
the way of
Yes.
Lightsworn. Like it fucking came in with the Trojan horse behind Lightsworn.
Yes.
Like you know what I mean? JD broke into the castle, and then out of JD's mouth was fucking Vayu. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's I love that. I love that it still found a way to top, which I didn't really think about. It still found a way to top without having to be the main deck, which everyone is expecting. Everyone was expecting. If you're like me, I look at what won the last tournament. I look at the decks that did well last tournament. I assume that a lot of people are just going to net deck or play those decks. They might modify them, but at the end of the day, they're probably going to play a variation of what did well already. And that's kind of not how you win tournaments typically, especially in a diverse format. You need to be innovative, and the decks that were innovative, like the Frog Hero Monarch deck, I'm just calling it FHM, like the FHM deck and the like the Lightsworn deck that sides in the Vayu Turbo. Those decks went out of their way to do something unique and cool, and they were rewarded for it.
Another important note is, at least maybe more people played it. I only saw one Gladiator Beast player, but this tournament had 2 Frog decks in top 8, top 3. It also had return of the Quick Draw Dandy Warrior deck, which traditionally I feel like didn't do well in this format, but Quick Draw got 5th place. And then right outside of Top Cut, like 9th place, was that other Frog deck, Frog Slicers deck, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I think if you look at this tournament, you go 3 really powerful Frog decks, Quick Draw. Next tournament, I think you should see more Gladiator Beast, right? If more people are going to play Frogs, you might see more GBs next tournament.
Yeah, if you're looking at the way the format is shaking out, if there are going to be more Frogs, because typically people will just play what has done well last. If there's going to be more Frogs in the format, there should be more Glabbies, naturally. And those Glabbies decks will probably be geared towards beating Frogs, naturally. Like they'll probably play, you might even see things like pure stun. I'm talking DD Survivor, Macrocosmos, Deep Fisher, Guardianos, stun. That type of thing. Like that might be a meta call coming up too, because I'm looking at all the decks that did well, and all of them will have a hard problem, including the zombie deck. All of them will have a hard problem dealing with a straight up stun deck that's playing Deep Fisher, Macro, and stuff like that.
Yeah, we saw, I think it was the Gladiator Beast player, actually.
He played Deep Fisher, yes.
He played Deep Fisher, yeah.
Yeah. So it's already kind of known that Deep Fisher is a good card, with the way things are going. The format is very graveyard dependent. Like, holy hell.
It is. One thing I did like from the Quick Draw deck is I do think, and granted he's had 12 years of hindsight to make it better. I do think this version of Quick Draw, even though it's still most of the same, I do think it's a little better than Jeff's original deck list from 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Even just off the simple fact that it main decks Brain Control. Like, the original deck list, I don't think has Brain Control in the main deck.
Oh, shit.
And that's fucking crazy. Like, it's Brain Control. Like,
yeah.
I think if you look, like, if I go to historic deck list on this website, and I look at the original Quick Draw Dandy Warrior, oh no, this one does have Brain Control.
Yeah, it plays Brain Control.
I don't know. I can't remember what. I saw something that I thought was weird, but I don't remember what it was. It obviously wasn't Brain Control, because here it is right here.
Well, he's playing 41 cards, so let's start with that.
It is playing 41 cards, though.
Yeah, so we could just start there. But it's
also playing Light and Darkness Dragon, which I think we already talked about. In hindsight, isn't as strong as we thought it was in 2010.
Yes, the card is not as good as it was. Yeah, I mean, it's very close to Jeff's, but it's just minor tweaks that I think matter. And also the side deck is really strong, because Jeff at the time, I think X-Sabers I guess he was just afraid of the X-Saber matchup. It's probably a bad matchup, and don't get me wrong, but X-Sabers are just not represented at all in this new Edison format. It's just not. It's just not a. And tournament is not a deck you're going to play. Now on the ladder, on DB, or you're just playing people randomly, you might run the occasional X-Saber player. But in actual tournaments nowadays, no one's playing X-Sabers. Everyone realizes the deck is just missing too many of its cards.
It's not that strong. And back then, like, X-Sabers were new. People liked X-Sabers. They're cards that people like. So people played X-Sabers just because they liked those cards, and they were trying to make them work. But now with 12 years of knowledge, we know that the deck isn't good yet
Yeah.
in this format. So
Yeah.
there's not really a reason to play it. I
Yeah.
also think System Down is like so much hate. I just don't think machines are good enough to warrant System Down. I just think Cyber Dragon is so
Yeah, that's true.
I think System Down is so much fucking hate.
Yeah. I'd like to three Pulling the Rug though, because Pulling the Rug is really good against Diva Hero. It hits all of Diva Hero's best plays. So Stratos, Diva, and Caius, which are the only plays that deck does that are intimidating.
Yeah.
It hits all of those. And people thought that that card was just sided for, let's say, a Gadgets or Gear Frame or Monarchs, but Pulling a Rug against Diva Hero, try it out. If you side that card against Diva Hero, it fucking hurts that deck.
Hits all their starters. How do they start the game if you pull in the rug?
Even mid game, like just a random tribute for Caius. They go tribute Stratos for Caius, or banish malicious, summon malicious, tribute for Caius, or banish malicious, summon Diva. All of these plays I'm saying, if you just go Pulling a Rug, they just have egg on their face.
I want to be honest, looking at this deck list, like, I don't know what it would be off the top of my head, but my man's got to take System Down out for something else. Just because I think this deck destroys Gadgets.
It does.
3 pulling the rug and 2 Cyber Dragon.
Bro,
like,
he's maining 3 hamsters.
Yeah, like, you're so good. Like, Gadgets aren't doing anything to you.
3 hamsters is so many hamsters. It's very difficult to get through 3 hamster with Gadgets.
Also, I don't remember, does Machina Fortress, does his effect where if he dies, he pops a card on the field, does that target? Because if that targets, you also just have Titanial. Like, Titanial beats over Fortress, and then if that effect targets, I don't remember.
It does target.
You just fucking sacrifice a Dandy token, and you go, okay.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get your Fortress effect.
Yeah, no, it targets. Yeah, this tournament was great. I love the fact that Edison format is evolving. One of the other things that I learned, before we wrap up this segment, we'll go into listener letters shortly. One of the other things that I learned was, so the online Edison tournaments feel very different than in-person Edison.
Oh, man. I love them. I love them.
In-person Yu-Gi-Oh, I think every region is probably going to have their own little meta, right? So I go to a local alternate universes, and a lot of the meta at my local is very heavy on setting monsters. It's very heavy on cat decks, which you do not see represented at all in these RBET tournaments. No one's playing cat, I've noticed. But at my local, there's usually 2 to 3 cat players. Last week there was a lot of hero beat. I think there were 3 players playing heroes. I was the first person to kind of bring the hero beat deck to my local.
I definitely think they're like you got like they saw what you did with hero beat, and now
I played it 2 weeks in a row, and I did well both times. One of the times going undefeated, and literally ever since then there's been an increase in hero deck. So now there's 3. Last week there were 3 hero beat players at my local. Now I've given up on the deck since then because I just like to switch it up all the time. But hero beat is becoming increasingly better. There's like someone playing quick draw, but yeah, our meta is so different from the RBET meta. And I guess that's kind of typical of Yu-Gi-Oh! In general. Like, if you play at your locals, then you go to a YCS. Unless it's a really established format, you're probably going to have a different experience from your local as far as the decks that you play against.
Yeah, because the local might have 10 to 30 people, but this tournament had 200.
Yes. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And when you're looking at these decks, some of these ideas are very good for big tournaments, but they might not translate as well. They might not be as impactful at your local scene. So just,
what I thought you were going to say, I agree with what you said, but what I thought you were going to say is just the simple fact that something I really enjoy about the Edison online tournaments is how fucking fast they run, comparatively.
Oh, yes.
Granted, if you look at the VOD, day 1 was 10 hours, day 2 was 5 hours. There was 200 people there. However, think about the fact that you're not ever waiting for your rounds. You play round 1, and then because it's bracket, it's not like whatever the fuck they do, because it's bracket, you just go to your next round. Go to your next, like, if your next guy, like, you just can, it was cool because there were some people that were still in round 2, but there was other people that were in round 5, just because they were playing, and then, like, these guys were playing slow, but because 3 people are playing slow, it's not holding up the rest of your day. You can just be on round 5 already, and then, like, if you're out of the tournament because you lose, you're out. Because if you lose twice, you're gone.
Yeah, you just double elimination, so you have to worry about, oh, maybe I'll top at X2 and all that. Like, no, you're just out.
Yep. So I really enjoyed how clean it could run, just being bracket. With everything, like, there's kinks that you work out time after time. This tournament ran a lot better, I think, than the first one, and then I'm sure the third one will run even better than this one. And yeah.
I plan to play in the next one. In the meta will probably shift again just because naturally Edison just has so much to offer, and this tournament was proof of that. So just when you think that the format might be, people might be like, oh, Vayne Turbo won the last one, that's probably the best deck, and Diva Hero is doing so well, it's probably the best deck. And then you see this tournament, neither one of those decks topped, and they were played. I think
Yeah,
both of
they
them
were
were the two most represented decks in the tournament, by the way.
they were played a lot.
Yeah,
Like people played those decks because, like you said, people looked at the last tournament. They said, "Oh, these decks got first. And this is the best deck," and
yeah.
everybody played it. And then the people that won the tournament, the people that got top 8, none of them played it. They were like, "Nope, like we're gonna, play these decks that we think work really well."
Yeah.
And shout out to them, they got top 8.
All right, so let's go into our next segment, which is our listener letters. If you guys want us to read your letter out loud on the show, just write into IMNerdPodcast@gmail.com and we may read it aloud on the show. Before we get into that, also, I do want to say that IMNerd Podcast has a Patreon. Currently, we have 27 patrons, so shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. We really appreciate it. It goes a long way. We have a couple different tiers for you guys. We also drop exclusive episodes. There's an exclusive episode dropping for the month of March real soon. We recorded it already, so that will be coming out shortly. So there's episodes that you can only see, their video too. You can only see them by being on our Patreon. And we also have a Discord for the IMNerd Podcast that you can join by being at the lowest tier, which is only $3. If you pay the lowest tier of our Patreon, the $3 tier, you can join the Discord and you're in there forever. Like once you're in it, I'm not policing who is still a patron and all that stuff. Like once you're in it, and that's it. So if you just want to do $3, support the podcast that one time, sign up for the Patreon, and then get into the Discord and cancel it after that, that's fine. You'll stay in the Discord forever. It's whatever. But yeah, I want to give a shout out to the people who are actually on our Patreon. A lot of them have been here since day one. So I'll read these in order that people actually joined the Patreon. So every time I read this list, it's always from our very first patron to the newest. So it always starts off Connie, Austin, Leon, Quest, Garen, Hylian, TCG Automotive, Silver Chronic, Tyree Tinsley, Dimitri Barnes, Alexander Brissett, Vinny Casello, Dominique Roberts, Game for Yoshi, Alex Flamer, Gabe Marini, Henri Reynolds, CJ, WK-1, Saul at Dabbers Gaming Cafe in Georgia, Dan Vrabel, Dennis Milburn, Joseph Marcello, Scott Page, Red Vines, First to Home, and Dalis Forneris, our newest patron. Thank you guys so much. As I always say, it goes a very long way, your support and everything. So look out for the extra episode coming out soon. And without further ado, let's go over to our listener letters. Okay, so we have a listener letter about Yu-Gi-Oh! Talk from Austin Cruz. He says, definitely enjoy the Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes the most for sure, since I actually have a decent enough job to have the funds to play Yu-Gi-Oh! I've always played competitively, but never really had the funds to really put towards the game like I wanted/needed. I've played meta a few times and also like to experiment. In formats where I played at a disadvantage, GB's way past their prime, and I think a lot of people have been there. Like a lot of people wanted to play Glabbies past their prime. But he says, in formats where I played at a disadvantage, just because I had to play a deck I know to even be able to afford expensive staples, I would play well enough to where I would almost make it to day 2. What really got me back into playing was the first regional I played since BA first came out. Early 2020, I had recently gotten all the new GB support that had come out. Still, Master Rule 4, where all extra deck monsters had to go to link arrows and new time rules. I ended up finally getting my third loss in the last round and even got to Cowboy for a game a few times. I only really had knowledge of the meta from my locals, and my card pool knowledge at the time was even more limited. I still bubbled out of a regional with limited knowledge and an outdated deck. I think that's what set me off to realizing I can do it and have been playing meta decks that I enjoy and really work well with. I also forgot how much fun it is to play meta-relevant decks. The fun thing about current Yu-Gi-Oh! Is it's almost becoming like Duel Academy variety. The amount of meta and other viable decks is getting to be like the Smash Ultimate roster, which is funny because normally I don't like that because there's too many side cards to choose from, but with cards being more generic, it helps cover a lot. However, I'm like you, and where I'm terrible at starting the deck, but I can edit it pretty well. So, couple things there. I agree with you in that I did notice that current Yu-Gi-Oh! Is all over the place. There's not one deck. In fact, it's kind of a meme to talk about the best deck in current Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there really isn't a deck that has established itself as the best deck. In fact, the last YCS was won by a 60-card Paula cards. So just to put it in perspective, there's no one deck that people can say is, 100% the best deck right now. You can lose to literally anything. And there's so many viable decks that people are playing. There's Based, there's Drytron, apparently Bird Up is around, there's Tri Brigade, there's PK, and all of these decks are playing the Brave package too. So there's all types of shit like that. There's Sword Soul still lurking around. There's a ton. And also there's the Flunderees deck, which apparently is doing really well. My friend Jarrett Randolph has been killing the PA scene with his Flunderees deck. Apparently when that deck gets going, it just can't be stopped. And I've heard complaints about the Eldritch deck is actually really, really good, which I'm not surprised about because Skill Drain's at 3, Mystic Mine, I believe, is at 3. So,
Ooh. Can I ask a question?
go ahead.
What the fuck does PK refer to? Is it Phantom Knights or Prank Kids?
PK refers to Phantom Knight, but Prank Kids technically also are PK. But no, when people say PK, they are talking about Phantom Knight.
Because I see so many things where people say PK, and I go, y'all realize that could be 2 different decks, right?
Yeah,
like, I don't know.
Both of them are relevant.
Yeah, and they're both relevant. So I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about.
Apparently, right now, Prank Kids are doing really well too. Like, I've heard good things about how they performed at the regionals this past weekend. And I think just in general, they've been kind of terrorizing locals because one of the coolest things about Prank Kids, it's a 1-card starter for that deck. That deck literally summons 1 monster, any of its monsters, and it can just combo from 1 monster. Yep. Most of the other decks, go ahead.
So me, who, slowly learns about current Yu-Gi-Oh over time, after, I went to AU a few times and then playing Master Duel or whatever. At first, I knew what Prank Kids were. I knew about Prank Kids just because, I heard about I thought they were a funny name. I liked the card art. So I knew what Prank Kids were. So then I started hearing people talk about PK, and I always assumed they're talking about Prank Kids. But then I realized there's this other deck called Phantom Knights. And then I'm like, I don't know what the fuck people are talking about.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I think one of the other things that you mentioned in this listener letter is so valid, though. When there's a lot of decks, it gets a little overwhelming to side deck because you need to cover a lot of matchups. You don't know what your tournament's going to be. And I think that's one of the struggles of Edison format, actually, because unlike current Yu-Gi-Oh! Where cards like Lightning Storm, Evenly Matched, Forbidden Droplets, they kind of sweep an entire section of decks. Like, they just take out, like, all stun varieties can get wiped out by Lightning Storm, right? The same can't really be said for Edison format. There aren't cards that just wipe out several matchups at once. Like, DD Crow is very good, Cyber Dragon's decent, but outside of that, everything else seems very niche. Like, pulling the rug is pretty much hitting like 1, maybe 2 matchups. You know what I mean? So a lot of the cards that people side deck right now, they can hit multiple matchups, but for the most part, they're mainly for one thing. Like, for example, the guy was siding GB Hunter. How specific can you get? Like, you can't get more specific than that. But then I do like seeing somebody side deck Fossil Dyna, because
I love Fossil Dyna.
Fossil Dyna can be used even if you don't draw well. Fossil Dyna can just get you back in the game. What I also just thought about as I'm saying this, GB Hunter may not be as bad in Rog's deck if he can dupe block you and then normal summon it. If he can dupe block you and then summon GB Hunter, you probably just lose because now you can't attack. And you also have this monster he's going to put in defense mode next turn. So, like, turn 1, he'll, like, after he dupe blocks you, he'll summon it, and it's, it has 1200 attack, but you can't get to it. The same reason why I think Ocean is good in that deck. And then he switches to defense mode, and once it's in defense mode, it's 2000 defense, so you really can't beat it now. So I could see an argument being made that if you can get established, I think the problem with that argument, though, is that it is hard to get established against Glabbies.
Yeah, you got to do a lot. You got to set the dupe block up and have drawn GB Hunter.
Yeah, it's not easy to get set up. And so I understand where he was coming from. Like, if you get to go special swap, normal substitute, set up your dupe block or whatever, and then go from there, sure, that's amazing. And then GB Hunter is a blowout card. But I think for the consistency's sake, like, Fossil Dyna is kind of nice. And also, Fossil Dyna has the same brokenness because if you dupe block them and then you go summon Fossil Dyna, they can't attack the 1200 attack power Fossil Dyna either. And that's awkward.
I also think, oh, fuck, excuse me, I'm yawning a lot. I also think that Fossil Dyna covers, after turn 1, Fossil Dyna also kind of covers Gladiator Beast, because after turn 1, your Gladiator Beasts are all special summoned, right?
Yeah.
Like, for the most part. Whereas, like, turn 1, GB Hunter will stop that first normal summon Glad Beast, but after that, if they attack into face down Fossil Dyna, like, that's going to blow up the Glad Beasts that are on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I kind of get the GB Hunter thing, but at the same time, it is wishful thinking, in my opinion, that to try to dupe block them and then do it. What we ended up seeing was him just having to set it, and it did do something, but not enough.
Yeah.
So, What else is there? So yeah. Oh, I did want to also elaborate on how fun it is to play meta. So I am a guy who my dueling career kind of started off playing anti-meta, right? I played Gravekeepers. That was the first I got top with. And then I also played Dragoonity as my next top, YCS Charlotte 2011. But then eventually I just became a meta player. Like there was a period where I was playing like off beat decks and topping with them. And then I just went to Plants, which was the best deck and everyone knew it. And then later in my career, it just was like apparent that I was playing pretty much the best deck in every format, whatever that was. Um, Playing non-meta decks is also fun. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the underdog thing. Like I kind of root for the underdog often. I'm that guy. So I like putting myself in a situation where I am the underdog, but I won't complain though when I'm playing a non-meta deck and I lose to the meta. Like I'm not that guy. I won't pick a shitty character in Smash Ultimate and then be like, oh, you're playing Joker, like he's so broken and stuff like that. I'll just be like, yeah, like I'm fucking playing Zelda and she's bottom tier basically, and you're playing Joker who might be the best character in the entire game. I don't expect to win unless you're not good at the game pretty much. Like your frame data alone just beats me as you only have to breathe really. So, if you like playing off meta decks, you just have to accept that your reality is a lot of times you are going to lose to the best deck because it's the best deck for a reason, or you're going to lose to whatever the meta is if there is no one best deck. If there's like, the new package for the Brave token thing, if that's what's the best and you're playing Eldritch, like yeah, sometimes you're going to get creamed by people playing Brave because that deck is better than Eldritch overall. Like it's the deck that's performing the best, it's the deck that has the higher ceiling and all that good stuff. But playing meta is also really fun. It's nice to just know when you sit down, no matter what your opponent's playing, I technically have the best deck in the room, in some way.
Yeah. As long off meta is fun or not the best deck. I won't even say off meta. Like playing the second best, third best, or just not the best deck is fun as long as whatever that is playable. And what I mean is, for example, you mentioned Smash, right? And Melee, amongst the characters that are playable, Melee is one of the most balanced games in the fucking world. When you just look at the 8 characters that are playable, the game's incredible and it's super balanced and super fun, right? And you can play any of those characters. You don't have to just play Fox or just play Marth. All of those characters are really, really fun to play and can do really sick shit no matter who you're playing. But what's not fun is if you play Link, you may love Link. You may be, I'm just playing for fun, but you're not ever having fun because you don't ever play the game. Like, if you just play Link, you just kind of get dogged. So if you're playing like an off-meta deck, as long as your deck can still do things and you get to have fun while you're playing it, it's cool. But sometimes people play off-meta and then they'll just complain that they don't ever get to do anything. And it's like, yeah, your deck doesn't do anything. That's why. Like, it's not ever going to do anything.
Right. One of the other things you mentioned is you played Glabbies way past their prime, but you were playing them in 2020, which is definitely way past their prime. Their prime was 2007, 2008, before Teledad. They ruled the world. However, there have been some absurd Glabbies cards that have come out since those days. And one of them, I just want to talk about it a little bit. Gladiator Beast Tamer Editor. That fucking card is nonsense. It is an A-star fusion monster. It has 3,000 defense, 2,400 attack, and you summon it by putting 2 level 5 or higher Glabbies monsters back into your deck, so it's a contact fusion like all the rest of them. But what it does, every turn, you can special summon a Glabbies from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. And that is just fucking wild. Because Glabbies now have an Omni-Negate monster that just negates monster effects, I think, and it might even banish them when he negates them, but I know he negates monster effects the same way Heraclinos negates spells and traps by discarding a card. I think he does that for monster effects or something like that. And he's 3,500 if I'm not mistaken, so he's huge. So you can summon him, you can summon Herc, and every time that he lives on the field, you can just keep on mass producing these fucking monsters. When I saw this card, I immediately thought that maybe Glabbies have some opportunity. Obviously, they do not. But if they do get this card out on the field, it is very problematic, and it would be cool if one day Glabbies are playable. I'm not even saying best deck again, but just playable, where we get to see Gladiator Beast Tamer Editor be used for real, because this card seems so fun to just every time be like Heraclinos, then 3,500 guy, then another Heraclinos, and they can't stop you.
Yeah, I think the problem is that every deck nowadays, it does all their setup in main phase 1, whereas Glad Beast, their setup comes in battle phase.
Yes.
And so it's like...
Oh, this guy has another effect too. He says at the end of the battle phase, if your Glad Beast monster battled, you can shuffle that monster into the deck or extra deck, special summon a Glad Beast monster from your deck. So he makes everything tag out twice, I think, or something like that. Yeah, he does some broken shit. He lets you just tag out a bunch of times. So he's ridiculous. He makes the monsters that don't even tag out, which is kind of scary. And yeah, he's just a really good card. So when you brought up Glabbies, I immediately thought about their new support because they have some new support. They have some other cards, but I won't even go over. I just think that this guy specifically is the one. Like he is the reason for the season. So, all right, we have another listener letter. It's also from Austin, and this one is on our Monster Hunter, the Monster Hunter Rise expansion. So Austin says, so this expansion definitely has me hyped, and it's got me into playing Rise again. As Stylos coming back is pretty sweet. One of the deviants I was able to fully beat. I don't know if you used the Adept Charge Blade in Generations, but it was honestly a pretty broken combination. General Shielding was a guard point at the right timing where you could immediately fill your files, or a full charge double attack. Instead of rolling through the roar, which I used to do in Freedom Unite, I could just block it as a guard point. So yeah, back in Generations and Generations Ultimate or Double Cross if you played the Japanese one, the styles, the forms, whatever you want to call them, they were just nuts. Like Brave was ridiculous. Adept, all of them.
In English,
Ariel,
Brave is called Valor.
Yes, Valor form is broken.
I tried all the Greatsword forms. Greatsword's my favorite weapon.
Oh
I tried all the Greatsword
when that
forms.
one gets to Valor, it is not okay.
And Valor Greatsword is fucking sick.
Bro,
like, oh my god.
I want them to bring that to Rise somehow.
Dude.
I don't know how, because you know how when your Brave bar is full, when your Valor bar is full, you kind of start doing that sidestep thing, like where you just,
yeah, baby,
your dash becomes a fucking actual movement. Oh my god! And then you charge up so quick too. Your triple charge with Greatsword.
You go right. First of all, you go right into your second charge attack. He skips the first charge attack, goes right into the second one. He goes into that stance.
Oh, that stance is cool as shit.
It just like you're on the third charge immediately, and then. That's if you do the draw one. And then if you just like have your sword out, you can do a normal charge, but you can, instead of releasing it, you can like charge with triangle and then press circle. Instead of doing like a normal release, he does a dash forward release.
Yeah.
And so like, and it's omnidirectional, so you can just like charge and then like pick a direction and go that way. It's fucking crazy.
It looks scary as hell because you start moving fast as shit. The sidestepping, I want them to find a way to bring that into Sunbreak. That would be
Valor
amazing.
Greatsword.
Yeah,
a friend of mine was telling me to use Adept Greatsword, which I did use a little bit. I thought it was fun, but I felt like it was too situational, and I fucking Valor Greatsword was it.
Yeah, Valor and Aerial Greatsword I feel like are the two best for me personally. Like those are the ones that I like the most. I like Aerial Greatsword because you just triple charge a monster. You just jump over their head and just keep triple charging them. Sometimes you can stun lock a monster if you do it too many times. So
yeah, and then Aerial's cool because you get like that. You get the thing where you mount them and stab them in their back.
Yes. That was mounting back in the day. Before the new mounting system where you literally ride the monster, that used to be the mounting system where you kind of got on them and you just had to play a little mini game. And then after the mini game was over, the monster just fell for 20 seconds and everybody got to do free damage. But now they changed it to where you mount them for real.
I like that one.
Yeah, it was cool. So yeah, I can't wait for this to come out too. There were some very broken combinations in those Generations games, and they found a way to incorporate some of the things into Rise. I noticed, like, so we don't have it where you just actually you do. So you mentioned how you can block, you can use guard point, and you get all your files back. Well, they have a I guess what is it called? A wire bug thing.
Yeah, like a silk bind.
A silk bind move where you press like L2 circle, whatever it is on a Switch controller, but you press that. And if you block a move, it fills up all of your files in Rise. So, and I said that shit is broken. Like to me, that one Silkbind move is so scary and crazy.
Yeah, the Silkbind moves, the Switch skills add a lot. Like you don't have styles that you get to choose anymore, but I think what they've done is since the older Monster Hunter games in the World and then in the Rise, they've taken the different styles of the weapons and tried to unify it into like this is how the weapon plays.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit of all the styles in the weapon. Like Greatsword, when I play Greatsword in Rise, I see it has a little bit of this, a little bit of that from different styles from Generations Ultimate. Even like Adamant Charge Slash. It's not quite the same thing, but it's like that thing where in Valor mode, I charge and then I can like press the button to dash forward and hit you.
Right.
I have that with Adamant Charge Slash. Adamant Charge Slash, I can pick a direction, I go that direction, and then I start charging my sword in your face, and I have hyper armor while I do it.
Yeah,
so that
and you can
they add little shit like that. Yeah, you can extend its distance, shorten its distance. So like that's really cool. And then you like Rage Slash is based on I don't remember what it's called, but one of the ultimate moves in Generations Ultimate where you have like I think it's called like Brimstone Slash or something like
yeah.
that.
I think it is Brimstone Slash, but that move takes entirely too long to actually come out. So I think,
but it had the Rage Slash mechanic where if you got hit, it got stronger.
Yep.
So
and you were armored up while you were doing it.
Yep.
It looked really cool though. It looked like you were charging up Kaioken or some shit.
It really does.
Yeah. So that was really, really cool. But all right, so this wraps up this episode of the IMNerd podcast. I think that we're pretty much done. Those were the listener letters. We touched on Edison format again. Our next episode is, I guess I should say, I'm not sure how we're going to release these, but we're actually recording 2 episodes tonight at once because we also want to talk about the slap seen and heard around the world between Chris Rock and Will Smith. So one of those episodes is going to come out first, and then whatever one, either this episode about Edison and these listener letters is going to come out next, or vice versa. I'm not sure. But we'll see you guys soon. And again, check out our Patreon, check out our YouTube channel. Subscribe to us on Spotify so you get notifications when we actually drop new episodes, which usually is every Monday and Thursday of the week. And if you have any questions or you want us to read something about on the show, write into the IMNerd podcast on gmail.com. As I always say, do the things that make you happy.
So long, Gay Bowser.
So long.